Hey everybody, Jason Sherman here. In today's episode of Zero to CEO, I'm going to talk to Jon Ostenson. He's a leading expert in the franchise consulting space. Welcome to the show.
Appreciate you having me, Jason.
Yeah, no problem. And today we're going to talk about why non-food franchise opportunities are so popular right now, which I actually didn't know that. So I'd like to actually find out why they're so popular right now. Who's buying all these franchises and why are they buying them? What are they buying? Let's hear the scoop.
Absolutely. No, I think there are some macro trends that support this. We have record levels of cash on the sideline. We see a lot of real estate investors looking for alternative investments. Now the interest rates are so high and there's a scarcity of inventory out there in the housing market. And then we see a lot of folks, I think, still coming off of COVID a few years ago that have really started contemplating the path they're on and saying, maybe now's the time to jump into business ownership. They like the idea of the franchise model where they're stepping in and, to be cliche on you, starting on third base rather than starting on first base. But those that we see jumping in, we've had placements this year already, those in their 20s all the way to 60s. But I'd say sweet spots oftentimes, mid 30s to mid 50s. And sometimes we work with existing business owners as well, and they're looking for additional revenue streams. So wide variety of backgrounds, everyone from doctors and attorneys to corporate executives to existing business owners across the country, literally in just about every state out there. And, what we see them getting into, kind of your final piece of the question. Go ahead, Jason.
I want to see if I can unpack all this because as I'm listening to you, there's like 5 questions popped up before I forget them. The first one, you mentioned doctors and lawyers. And so like if they're already running a franchise, I guess kind of running a physical business, right? So like that's very time consuming. How can they then split up the time between being a doctor and a lawyer to then being a franchise owner? Because I know you have to hire managers and all that, but you still got to run the business.
Yeah, no, exactly. And they're highly compensated W-2s. They're not leaving their day job, right? In most cases. Now, you and I both know standing up a business takes work. I don't want to ever sugarcoat it. There's a lot that goes into it. It's going to take longer than you think. Not everything is going to go right. The nice thing about franchising is it does allow individuals like that to have a lot more ability to do that, because if you have a strong franchisor on the sideline that's supporting that manager that you put in place to run the day-to-day operations, they can carry a lot of that support water for you. We all know the buck still stops with you as the owner, but that franchisor can really lean in, be that go-to for them on the daily basis, and really set them up for success so it doesn't all fall on your shoulders.
Okay. And before you mentioned the housing market kind of changed things, the real estate market. Now, I know all too well, that it used to be easy to buy a house, fix it, flip it. And then all of a sudden, boomers aren't leaving their houses, right? They have these $500,000 homes that they bought for $100,000, decades ago. And they're not budging because they realize the interest rates are 7% or higher. So there's a crisis right now in real estate for sure. Why is that now leading people towards franchises? I mean, I get kind of the basic concept behind that, but like the last thing I thought of was a franchise if I'm having trouble with real estate. So like how do they match up?
Yeah, I think there's a mindset there of creating revenue streams that you may not always be actively managing. That's what you think of with real estate in a lot of cases, one of the benefits. Another one would be, the benefits of the taxation. I mean, the government through the tax code supports business owners and they support real estate investors because they need both of those things for the economy. So again, these real estate investors are saying, hey, in addition to my real estate portfolio, what other alternative assets are there out there that are tax advantaged where I might be able to apply some leverage? Really just a lot of similarities between the two. Now, in some cases, they're getting involved in businesses that they're already using, let's say on their rental properties or renovation opportunities, things like home and property services. That could be everything from restoration services to flooring to dumpsters to gutters to all sorts of non-sexy cash flowing businesses. In some cases, they're saying, hey, I'm more involved on the commercial real estate side. And
right.
I love the idea of, finding retail tenants for buildings that I already own, or, maybe some real estate plays around that. So, we see some indirect as well as direct investment coming from that.
I mean, a lot of what you're telling me too kind of starts hitting me where I realize like doctors and lawyers, real estate investors, and so on and so forth. These are high net worth individuals, right? This doesn't sound like the everyman which, we have 300 million plus people in America. How many of them are falling into this category? So the question that I would have is, what is it going to cost a regular person to start a franchise, and how much could they potentially earn in terms of revenue? Because that's really my listeners. They're not doctors and lawyers. They're entrepreneurs, college graduates, and people who are just getting started.
Yeah, no, great question. On the funding side, I'd say all-in investment. Certainly, we have some that are well north of this, but oftentimes when you look at the franchise fee, the startup costs, and then several months of working capital built in, you can be as low as 125,000. I'd say 125 to 300 is where we see a lot of these falling. But not everyone's paying cash. In fact, the majority are not paying cash.
They might out a loan.
They might put in 50,000 in cash and then use an SBA loan. That's very, very, very common. Some are using an old retirement plan, rolling that over through what's called a ROBS program to purchase it. Some are using HELOCs or other means. So a lot of ways to get in. I'd say.
I don't want to cut you off, but yeah. I just want to keep drilling on this. How long does it typically take them to pay off that loan?
Yeah, depends on the business. There's some that can be cash flowing as fast as a month or two out of the gate. I'd say the majority probably are turning a monthly profit 6 months out.
It's not bad then. It's not bad.
There's some. Right. And there's going to be some payback there. Of course, the interest is tax deductible, but I'd say your payback period oftentimes may be, 1 to 2 years, but you're building a cash flow.
And it's a business.
It's a business. You're getting the tax benefits. You're also building an asset that you're going to be able to sell down the road. So you kind of have to look, when you compare this versus, say, a salary, a W-2, you have to compare the apples and oranges, right?
It makes sense. And plus, you're paying a lot of taxes on that, and you're pretty much stuck at that salary. I mean, you get bonuses and whatnot, but you're not going to grow as a business owner. So let's talk revenue. What are we talking here? You put $125,000 in. A year later, you pay off that $125,000 or 75 because you put in 50. And then what are we talking after that? Year two, how much is a person earning on that investment?
I'd say oftentimes your run rate at the end of the first year is somewhere between 600,000 and $1 million. I'd say that's pretty common. I just had a client the other day. He did 950 in his first year and set a new record for first year revenue for that franchise system.
Is that gross or net?
That would be gross. And oftentimes your margin, let's just say on a business like that, we'll round it, call it $1 million in revenue that he's hitting at the run rate of. Because he's past that run rate at the 12-month period if he hit it in the first year. So $1 million in revenue. He's probably at about a 20% bottom line net margin after all the expenses.
So it's like $200,000 a year the person is making running that franchise, which is more than triple what people make in their salaries, right?
Right. And again, building an asset that you can sell down the road as well.
And does that grow? Is it pretty much capped at that million, or does it grow from there?
Yeah, of course, it just depends
varies on a million
business.
variables.
There's some where, right, with one territory, say 250,000 in population, maybe what they used to define a territory at the zip code level. It may be able to grow beyond that, but it may be that no, you've developed as much as business as can be had in that territory, and it's going to take additional locations. So it is common for our clients to often buy additional locations to scale into over time.
Double their profit, triple their profit. I get it. But I mean, if someone's happy with like you said, $200,000 a year, I mean, that's not nothing to sneeze at, right? Especially if it's kind of running itself, which brings me to the question, is it possible to own a franchise and just have it be passive where you don't have to do a lot of the day-to-day operations?
There are 4 or 5 out there.
Let's hear about them.
that are passive. There's a great one in the installation business. I personally own one that's in the custom orthotics and footwear business. They use 3D printing to custom design the art, art sports. Yeah, just opened one up in the fall back in Delray, Florida. Well, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
It's a physical location?
Yeah, and I'm not active in the business at all. Franchisor is running it for me. Now, that sounds beautiful. There are only a few brands that do that, literally 4 or 5 of them. We've got 2 in the pet space, 1 in the property services arena, the installation, I mentioned the orthotics one. So I'm hesitant to say beyond that there are passive opportunities. They're what I would call semi-passive, where again, you put a manager in place, you provide some support, but assuming you've got someone good running the business, I mean, that's what it comes down to. Of course, that franchisor can really support them on the sideline. And, you can, I've got other franchises I own where I put in maybe 5 hours a week, in some cases, even less. Did I do that in the first year? No, but I built up to that point, right?
Well, that's how it works, right? I mean, once you get something kind of moving and it's smooth, then you can kind of, leave a little bit more. And so a lot of the people that are going to be listening to this are potentially ready to start a franchise, or they've thought about running a franchise, but they don't exactly know what to do or what franchise to start, because like you said, there's 4,000 of them. I'm guessing there's a lot of food related franchises, and like, what if they don't want to run a food related franchise? How do they choose the right franchise for them?
Yeah. So if you take out food and hotels, which I think are a different animal as well, that cuts out about half the market. Call it 2,000. Of those 2,000, some are going to be completely saturated, or maybe they're not in growth mode. So there are about 600 that we focus on, that we represent through FranBridge Consulting, that are in growth mode. They've got expansion room in the country. We're always adding to that number. But ones that we vetted, and it's entirely free to work with us. We take clients through a very streamlined process, essentially introducing them to the top 10 or so opportunities that are available in their market for what they're looking to do. And it's entirely free. We get a referral fee, very much like I'm essentially a real estate broker, but for franchises.
Right. That's pretty cool. And I'll ask you a bit about that in a minute. So now I'm going to ask you the difficult question before we talk about your consulting company is, what's the difference between an entrepreneur who has a really good idea for a business and they're like, okay, I can start this from scratch, not pay $125,000 up front, not get a loan, and kind of bootstrap this startup, get my clients or my user base, get investors to give me millions of dollars, scale this thing, become a unicorn, sell for $1 billion, and I'm out of here, right? Versus paying $125,000, putting 2 years worth of work into an existing business and maybe only earning $200,000 a year and being kind of stuck there. What's the pros and cons of these two different situations?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we support those that do run with their idea. I do think there are a lot more that it doesn't work out for that do. I mean, when we look at the success rate of franchises, they're still open after 5 years versus non-franchise. Right. It's not being close. I will say some people are too entrepreneurial though for franchising. They want to put their thumbprints all over the business. They don't want to stay within the lines. But what I found is a lot of people, including existing business owners, love the idea of franchising because, again, you get a head start. This has been proven out in other markets. You've got a playbook to go execute day one. You've got support from the franchisor on the sideline. You've got other franchisees around the country living the same thing day in, day out, exchanging best practices. Maybe you have a leveraged supply chain because you're buying in bulk, even if that's for services, maybe not for product. You have marketing, some degree of marketing optimization from day one because the company that's helping you with the marketing has already run it in other markets. And, there's been research to show that franchises trade in like-kind industries at a higher multiple than non-franchised in the same industry. Now, there aren't many franchises that are tech startups. Those are not apples to apples.
Yeah.
But in other industries, things like home and property services, health and wellness, kids, pets, seniors, all these different categories that people have an interest in, that's where our clients are moving.
So if I'm a listener and I hear this episode, I'm like, this sounds interesting to me, and this guy's not charging me anything. Take me through the process of what I would expect by working with FranBridge Consulting.
Yeah, we keep it super streamlined. So we would get on an introductory call. I'd ask some leading questions, gather some information, have you fill out a brief online profile that only takes a couple minutes. And then I would come back to you a couple days later with the opportunities, and I would present to you, hey, if I'm in your shoes, here are the 10 or 12 opportunities in your market that I'd want to be looking at, and here's why. And their goal would be to narrow it down then to maybe 3 or 4 to actually have a conversation with. From there, the franchisors will take them through a series of calls and presentations, trying to get them as much information as possible over about a month or two, introducing them to other owners and their systems. They can hear about their experiences, leading up to what's called a discovery day, where they would fly them into their home office. I'm there on the sidelines with my team, supporting them, getting on touch base calls, providing funding resources or franchise attorney to review the agreement or coaching resources. So kind of a one-stop shop to help them get from nowhere to business ownership.
Very cool. And that's at franbridgeconsulting.com. Definitely check it out if you're interested in a franchise. This was awesome, Jon. I appreciate all the information. And as always, we'll see you guys in the next episode.